Okay, so you think you know the story of the 2008 financial crash. You think you know the story of Jeffrey Epstein. But what if I told you that in the middle of all that chaos, while millions of people were losing everything, a secret bailout was happening in the shadows? One that connects these two stories in a way you've almost certainly never heard.
And that brings us to the central, baffling question we're going to unpack. How on earth does a debt that big, tied to a company chaired by, yes, that Jeffrey Epstein, just evaporate right at the height of a global financial meltdown? It sounds impossible. And that's the number, $6.7 billion. You have to let that sink in. While the world's financial system was in an absolute freefall, an obscure offshore company holding this much toxic liability was quietly made whole, paid in full. The story of how that happened has been buried for over a decade.
To really understand how this was even possible, we need to look at the financial weapon at the center of this whole mystery, a company called Liquid Funding Ltd.
So a trove of leaked documents, the Paradise Papers, blew the lid off this thing. And they revealed Jeffrey Epstein as the chairman of this entity, conveniently based in Bermuda, far, far away from the eyes of regulators. And it wasn't some standalone operation. It was deeply tangled up with the investment giant Bear Stearns, which owned a 40% stake and even managed all its investments.
Now, liquid funding was a very specific kind of company called a structured investment vehicle, or an SIV. The easiest way to think about this is like a secret garage. A big bank like Bear Stearns uses it to park its riskiest, most dangerous assets, stuff they don't want on their official books. It creates this shadow financial system with almost no oversight. It was basically a financial Jenga tower built in a locked room.
And what exactly was parked in this secret garage? Well, it was stuffed to the gills with the exact kind of toxic subprime mortgage junk that was about to detonate the entire global economy. You know, this stuff's so complex and so dangerous that pop culture eventually gave it a much simpler, more direct name.
This number, this just reveals the sheer insanity of the risk they were taking. For every single dollar of actual cash invested in liquid funding, the company was playing with $540 of these toxic securities. It was a high-wire act with no safety net, a house of cards on a cliff's edge, promising massive returns or, total annihilation.
All right, so let's jump to March 2008. That Jenga tower we talked about, it is wobbling. And the whole financial world is about to catch fire, with Bear Stearns, Liquid Funding's owner and manager, sitting right at the epicenter of the blaze. And the collapse was just breathtakingly fast. In a matter of days, one of Wall Street's oldest, most storied firms went from a titan to a beggar about to die, forcing the U.S. government to step in with an emergency intervention to stop the whole system from going down with it. Now, the government's solution to stop the bleeding was creative and highly controversial. They essentially invented a new kind of company on the spot, one that would have these hidden consequences that we're still uncovering today.
So here's how it worked. JP Morgan was willing to buy Bear Stearns for pennies on the dollar, but they had one non-negotiable condition. We are not touching the toxic waste on your books. So, to make the deal happen, the Federal Reserve created this special company, Maiden Lane LLC, designed for one purpose, to act as a government-funded dumpster for Wall Street's garbage.
And this right here tells you exactly who paid for that dumpster. The Federal Reserve, using taxpayer money, pumped in a staggering $29 billion. That's 97% of the total. JP Morgan, they chipped in a measly $1 billion. And in return, they walked away with a squeaky clean, government-guaranteed version of Bear Stearns. The risk was socialized, the resulting bank was privatized.
Okay, so at the very same moment that this massive, taxpayer-funded rescue is being cooked up in Washington and New York, something truly remarkable happens back at that mysterious offshore company chaired by Jeffrey Epstein.
Just a few weeks after the bailout is all finalized, the ratings agency Moody's puts out this stunning announcement. All $6.7 billion of Liquid Funding's toxic debt has been completely satisfied, paid in full. Just like that. The financial time bomb we started with was quietly and completely diffused.
And this is the brutal, undeniable backdrop for that secret payout. While this opaque offshore vehicle was made whole, what was happening on Main Street? 9 million Americans lost their jobs. 6 million families lost their homes. $2 trillion in retirement savings just vanished. The system protected one, and the other paid the price.
So we have to ask the critical question. Who paid the bill? Think about it. Bear Stearns was bankrupt. JP Morgan explicitly said we won't touch its toxic assets. So where in the world did $6.7 billion suddenly come from to pay off Liquid Funding's investors?
When you follow the chain of events, there's really only one conclusion you can draw. The money came from the Maiden Lane bailout. The Fed created this entity to absorb Bear Stearns' entire toxic portfolio. And legally, that portfolio included its 40% ownership of Liquid Funding and all the liabilities that came with it. There was no other pot of money this large. Taxpayer funds were funneled through Maiden Lane to make this Epstein-chaired company whole.
This whole episode just rips the curtain back on the deep flaws in our financial system. It raises these fundamental questions about transparency, about conflicts of interest, and about who exactly is being protected when a crisis really hits.
Let's just look at the key players here. The Federal Reserve, they orchestrated the whole deal but have never released a detailed public accounting of exactly what Maiden Lane bought with that $29 billion. JP Morgan, they not only got the clean Bear Stearns, but get this, they were also the security trustee for Liquid Funding itself. That's a glaring conflict of interest they've been completely silent about, and Bear Stearns execs, they watch their worst mistakes get wiped away by the taxpayer. To this day, no one has been held responsible.
And so that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. What we've looked at here is a grotesque transfer of risk from the powerful to the public. When the panic button gets hit, the system shields the interconnected, the powerful, and the opaque, even a vehicle linked to Jeffrey Epstein, and it sends the bill to everyone else. The real question isn't just why it works that way, but if no one is ever held accountable, is the system actually designed to work any other way?